Hello people, welcome to my channel. Happy listening. Ponniyin Selvan, Fresh Floods, Kalki, translated by Pavitra Srinivasan. Chapter 1, Auspicious RD. We ask our amiable readers to kindly disregard the present and climb into the boat of imagination that we may take a little journey across time, unmarred by beginnings and endings. We shall cross a century in a convenient second and reach a year roughly 982 years before our time. Written in 1950. Between the hoary lands of Tondainadu and Choranadu is placed the kingdom of Tirumunaipadi. In its southern region, roughly 2 kadams west of the famed Chidambaram temple, sprawls the huge Veeranarayanan lake, as large as an ocean. It measures something like 1.5 kadams from north to south and half a kadam from east to west. These days, it is known no longer by its full original name but by a much shortened colloquial version, Veeranath Eri or lake. Those who saw this massive body of water during the months of Adi and Avani, when the floods poured in fresh water, its surface churning and tossing, almost overflowing its banks, could not help but marvel in astonishment and heave sighs of delight at the great feats accomplished by their ancestors in ancient Tamilagam. For such deeds were not merely for their own advancement or even the betterment of those of their times, were they? Their benefit was passed down through generations, like the munificent plantain trees, bequeathing their resources to their young, enriching their descendants 1,000 years into the future, didn't they? On the auspicious 18th day of Adi, sometime in the early evening, a young man rode his horse along the banks of the Veeranarayana Eri, almost ocean-like in its vastness. A scion of one of Tamilagam's most distinguished clans, the Vanar Kulam, was a young man by name Vallavarayan Vandiyadevan. They had travelled a great distance without pause. His horse was weary and stumbled slowly along the path. Not that our young traveller was much distressed by this. He was too fascinated by the lake and its enormous proportions to set much store by his steed's fatigue. Adi Perukku was traditionally important for more than one reason. On this day, every river in Choranadu overflowed its banks. Consequently, every lake that flowed from the rivers was filled to the brim as well, the waters tossing and churning the surface. The river, known as Vadakaveri by devotees and Kollidam colloquially, fed straight into the Veeranarayanan Eri through the Vadavaru, and the latter was more an ocean in dimensions. Water gushed through the 74 canals that ringed the lake, bubbling and foaming, adding to the vast expanse and irrigating vast swathes of the surrounding land. Agriculture was the mainstay here. Farmers were engaged in ploughing, seeding, and planting their respective fields as the lake's waters flowed into their lands. Men and women, neck deep in their work, went about with sweet songs on their lips to alleviate the burden of labor. Vandiyadevan chose to linger on his way, listening to their songs. Besides, he was engaged in another more important task, verifying whether the lake did possess 74 canals as he'd heard tell. Thus far, he had travelled 1.5 kadams and counted only around 70. It was then that the true magnitude, the sheer vastness of the lake burst upon him in all its glory. Ha! Such length and breadth! How enormous it was, seemingly endless. Why, even the so-called large lakes dug by the Pallava emperors were nothing but tiny ponds in comparison. And then, consider the incredible foresight of Prince Rajadityar, son of Madurai's conqueror, the illustrious Parantakar, who had conceived the plan of diverting the Vadakaveri's vast waters into a lake of such proportions. Indeed, who could claim to be his equal when it came to sheer foresight and execution of plans? For that matter, there was no one who could match his courage and valor either. Wasn't he the warrior who had chosen to personally lead his armies into battle at Takkulam? Hadn't he borne an enemy's spear in his chest as he rode his war elephant and ascended to heaven as a valiant soldier? Didn't he fully deserve the title, he who embraced death on his elephant, as a result of his great deeds? In truth, these Chora kings were a strange and wonderful breed. They were outstanding in valor as they were in war, as committed to justice as they were to God. And he had actually had the great good fortune of mingling with, nay, claiming friendship with them. Vandiyadevan's shoulders swelled. His heart threatened to burst with pride, buffeted by waves of sheer exhilaration, just as the surface of the Veeranarayana lake heaved and tossed, striking the banks, whipped by the brisk west wind. By the time Vandiyadevan reached this point in his ruminations, he had arrived at the southern end of the lake and saw the magnificent sight of Vadavara emptying itself into it. The lake bed extended for a small stretch between the banks and the water's surface. Thorny karuvella and villa trees had been planted in it to prevent damages to the shore from floods. Sturdy gnarled bushes clustered thickly at the edges. In all, the sight of the Vadavara with water rushing between tree-laden banks and emptying with a roar into the Veeranarayana lake made a very pretty colourful picture indeed, from afar. Vandiyadevan was delighted with nature's painting. But there were a few other sights too that considerably increased his admiration and joy in his surroundings. The auspicious day meant that villagers from in and around the lake were in the mood for celebrations, and scores of men, women, children, and even a few aged ones took advantage of the festive occasion, dressed in their best clothes and finery, dragging along sapparams made of delicate ivory white coconut fronds. Women wove fragrant blossoms of jasmine, mullai, tarambu, sevandi, iruvachi, and shenbagam, spreading their sweet scent around. Of food there was plenty as well, in the form of delicious kutan chore, a mixture of rice and various condiments. Some strode along the banks, having ladled their food into cups fashioned from kamugu. Others, slightly more adventurous sightseers, walked right up to where the Vadavara poured into the lake and ate their food watching the sight. Children threw their used kamugu cups into canals, watched the flimsy containers tumble through choppy waters, and clapped their hands with glee. Some young men exhibited their playful nature, pulling flowers off their beloved's tresses without their knowledge, throwing them into the canal and laughing to see them burst through the lakeside. Vallavarayan stayed on the banks for a while, enjoying the sights and sounds of celebration. He took in the sweet, appealing melodies of the women. They ranged from both songs to kummi, sindhu, and even some celebrating the floods, in all their delightful variety. Come sing in welcome, the Vadavara leaps towards us. Watch and dance in welcome, the Vellar springs towards us. See, delight and welcome, the Kaveri rises towards us. These and many more songs were sung with joy, celebrating the new waters, and Vandiyadevan listened for all he was worth, the sweetness in the tone and verses gladdening his heart. Warlike fervour found favour among other celebrants in the groups. Some women enshrined in song the valour of Vijayalaya Chorar, who sported 96 scars on his battle-worn body from 32 wars. Yet another woman chose to sing about the piety and compassion of his son Aditya Chorar, who built 64 temples for Shiva Peruman all along the course of the Kaveri, from its birthplace to where it merged with the sea. Parantaka Chorar's incredible feats as he subjugated the Pandyas, Pallavas, Cheras, and won massive victories in Lankai were sung by a young lady with enormous zest and vigour. Everybody's performance was heard with gratifying attention. Sometimes listeners gave themselves completely to them, uttering spontaneous exclamations, "Ah! Ah!" Lost in revelry, Vandiyadevan gradually became aware of an old woman's scrutiny. "You look like you have travelled far and hard, Thambi. You must be very tired. Would you like to get down from that house of yours and share some of our nourishing kutan chore? This seemed to be the signal for every young woman in the vicinity to direct keen glances at our young man. Their laughing eyes settled on him. They giggled and tittered among themselves, obviously discussing his appearance. Vandiyadevan would have been paralyzed by bashfulness had not a part of him been overjoyed at the female attention. He wondered, briefly, if he should take up the old woman on her offer and gorge himself on food. But surely, if he did, those young women would surround him on all sides and swarm him with ridicule. But what of it? Opportunities to be swamped by a bevy of young ladies did not often come by. Even if they did ridicule him, surely the sound of their teasing laughter would defeat the mellifluous music of celestial beings. To Vandiyadevan's besotted young eyes, every maiden on the shore seemed to be no less a beauty than the divine dancers Rambha and Menaka who adorned Indra's court. Before he could accept the old woman's invitation, though, something else caught his attention and made him hesitate. In the distance, a heavenly sight met his eyes. 7 or 8 large boats glided swiftly along the Vadavara from the southwest, their white, silky sails fluttering in the brisk west wind, oars spread like the wings of a graceful swan. Men and women, indulging in celebration along the banks, gradually fell silent, their attention riveted by the approaching spectacle. One among the cavalcade outran the rest, making its way swiftly towards the northern bend of the lake. Soldiers lined its decks. Sunlight caught the glint of their spears and javelins, dazzling onlookers. Some of them jumped on shore and began to herd everyone with alacrity. "Clear out! Move away, all of you!" The celebrants themselves obviously did not want to lay themselves open to such bracing treatment. They were swift to pick up their belongings and move well away from the banks. Vandiyadevan watched the boats and warriors, puzzled. Who were they, and what sort of passengers did the boats behind them carry? Were they perhaps members of the royal family? He sidled up to an old man who stood on the banks, leaning on his stick. "Ayya, whose men are these? Whom do those swan-like boats belong to? Why do these soldiers drive away the people? And why does everyone obey them?" The questions fairly tripped off his over-eager tongue. "Why, Tambi, do you tell me that you do not recognize them?" The old man raised his eyebrows. "Do you see the boat in the midst of the rest, and the flag that flutters in it? Tell me, what is the emblem it bears?" "It seems to be a palm tree." "Indeed, and do you not know that it is the emblem of the Paruvettarayars, my lad?" "Good God!" Vandiyadevan exclaimed, startled. "Is it truly him, the great warrior Paruvettarayar?" "It must be. Who else would dare to brandish the palm tree flag with such authority?" Vallavarayan's eyes turned towards the approaching boats again, wide with astonishment. Such were the tales he had heard about the warrior among warriors, Paruvettarayar. But then who had not? The name and fame of the amazingly valiant Paruvettarayar brothers, both elder and younger, had spread through the length and breadth of Chola Empire, from Eram in the south to Kalinga in the north. The brothers hailed from the city of Paruvur on the northern banks of the river Vadakaveri near Urayur. Their clan had earned a name for valor from times of Vijayalayar. The Paruvur family claimed intimate ties with the Choras through marital alliances. Their royal connections and reputation for courage had made them one of the first families of the land, a clan that was almost, if not quite, the equal of the ancient Chora dynasty itself. Such an illustrious status also meant that they were among the few who could boast the privilege of a flag of their own. Of the current duo, the elder was more renowned, having earned legendary status in 24 battles for sheer bravery. It was common knowledge that he had no equal in Choranadu. More than 50 years old, he no longer graced battlefields but held several truly exalted positions in the Chora Empire: Dhana and Dhanya Adhikari, treasurer and guardian of granaries. His was the right to guard the resources of the land, both cash and kind. His also the privilege to assess the demands of the government, decide on the thirai or tax to be levied upon and collected from the people. He could march up to any Kottam official, affluent landlord or minister, and demand to be paid whatever tax he levied that year. In other words, Paduvettarayar was considered next in importance to none other than Maharaja Sundara Chorar himself in the empire. Naturally, Vandiyadevan's heart was filled with the unquenchable urge to catch a glimpse of this supremely important personality, this warrior who claimed the respect of every Chora citizen. But then he remembered the confidential message entrusted to him by Prince Aditya Karikalar in Kanchi's Golden Palace. Vandiyadeva, I am well aware of your prowess as a warrior. I am also aware of your keen intelligence, which is why I am entrusting this responsibility to you. Here are 2 palm leaves. One is to be delivered to my father, the Maharaja, the other to my sister, Ilaya Piratti. I hear such disturbing tales about even highly placed officials in the empire. You must, therefore, make sure that my message does not fall into their hands. No matter what position of authority they hold, not a whisper of suspicion must enter their heads that you carry a message from me. Do not, I repeat, do not pick fights along the way. It isn't enough if you don't quarrel with anyone. Make sure that you ignore anyone who forces a quarrel on you. Vallavaraya, I know you to be an excellent warrior, so you may be easy about your reputation. Rest assured that ignoring a few disputes isn't going to be a blemish on your honor. There was a pause. In particular, my lad, you must be very wary of the Paduvettarayars and my uncle Madurantakar. Not on any account must they know the purpose of your mission. Such was the message entrusted to him, not just by the crown prince of the Chora Empire, but one who held the vastly important position of Matanda Nayakar of the northern Chora forces. Aditya Karikalar had taken such great pains to impress ways of good conduct and behavior upon him, not to mention precise instructions to be carried out, that Vallavarayan could not find it in himself to ignore those words of caution. Meeting Paduvettarayar, therefore, was a desire he would have to suppress. Vandiyadevan heaved a sigh and spurred his horse forward. That noble animal, already worn down by hard travel, could do little more than ooze along the path. Well, that left him with only one option. He would spend the night at the Kadambur Sambhuvarayar palace and leave the next morning with a brand new horse, able and fit for travel. End of chapter. Hidden meanings and explanations. Kulam means clan or tribe. Tambi literally means younger brother, but is also used commonly to refer to a young man. Kadam, a unit to measure distance in ancient times. 1 kadam approximately equals 1.167 kilometers. Jamam, a unit of time measuring 2 hours and 24 minutes. Narigai, a unit of time measuring 24 minutes. This is the end of the chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. Please like, share and subscribe, and do comment if you have any suggestions for future books to read. Thank you.